very much.
Thank you. Okay. Well, my self-esteem has definitely risen with that introduction. 20 years of experience. Thank you. Don't get that very often. I'm gonna let that sink in. But yeah, I started out in Duke Energy, or it was Cincinnati Gas and Electric at the time, as an internship. Came out of college, and that was more my what I call my first big girl job. And I've been at MISO for about 22 years. So I've been pretty excited. If you heard a little bit of the intro, I started out mostly in operations, but moving over to planning has been some of the most rewarding experiences so far, especially with what we're doing with MISO's reliability imperative. Next, I can switch this, right? The green one, the green button. Okay, thank you. And so we heard a lot this morning just about the ambitious goals in our industry. MISO is kind of right in the forefront of that, in between the federal government and our electric utilities, and as a partnership to make sure that this goes well. As I mentioned earlier in the earlier talk, is a lot of our CEOs are getting out in front of this item where we really are trying to sound the alarm that our energy goals and policies are sometimes pushing us to the very edge of reliability, and it's very important that we take this very seriously as we're thinking about the next 20 years. And so I had a lot of experience earlier in our control room. I walked in there as a young engineer, electrical engineer, and said, this looks like NASA. I have to work in here. Eventually went up to be a reliability coordinator and worked with large power flows in our central region. But this chart right here, and we have a chart in the control room, we used to call it the Pac-Man chart, so I'm dating myself a little bit. I do like Pac-Man. Some of you folks in the room probably don't even know what that is, but that's okay. But it used to be more coal, like 85%, 70, 80%, and some gas. And now you can see just the transition of where we're going, primarily gas and coal. What we're forecasting 20 years out is 80% wind and solar. It's a complete transformation of the electric grid. And so talked a little bit about those fleet changes, a lot of good conversations about gas and fuel assurance. So in the past, you had the big coal piles ready and available for a coal fleet. Now we're thinking about weather-dependent resources. And when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing, those aren't available. Some of the things that we're also thinking about with gas is when we poll our members of our gas fleet in the MISO region, there's not a lot of long-term contracts. And so they are competing sometimes with heating and cooling during major winter storms. And so those are the things that we think about. Are we going to have the generation online when we need it? Extreme weather. I remember my days in the control room, and it was few and far between. In a major storm, everybody was on deck. So as an operator, you like the slow days where there wasn't much management in the room and it was nice and easy. Complete different during a storm. Everybody and their brother comes into the control room to make sure that we're prepared. There's a lot at risk. And over the time, we've seen more and more. We see that with Storm Uri and all of the tropical storms. And what they're predicting is that we'll have more frequent hurricanes, more frequent severe weather events with heat and cooling. And so this changing in atmosphere is another thing that we're really addressing. And a lot of things that we're thinking about too is on load growth. And we heard a lot about data centers in our southern region. There's about 1,000 megawatts that's coming online just for our load growth. And what we're also seeing is that's happening so quickly that it has to go through our expedited project review for transmission, that it's not going through our normal process for transmission study. It's coming in so quickly that it's going at a fast pace. Also talk a little bit about our load growth with electrification. So we're seeing what we're planning for in our future scenarios is potentially 30% growth in energy due to electrification of vehicles, electrification of the commercial and residential sectors. And as we move towards electric heating and cooling is going to be one of the bigger changes that we're seeing in MISO. And you can see this is our footprint, and we have 20 utilities that have at least 80% targets for clean energy by 2040 and into 2050. And we have at least 2 utilities that have 50% targets. So when you think about the policies that are coming upon us, it's a tsunami of change that's really transforming the generation fleet. And this is the volatility from real time that we've actually seen during Winter Storm Uri. We average at MISO sometimes around 8 gigawatts of wind generation. It's great. When the wind blowing, it's free. You put it in the right spot where there isn't congestion, it's fantastic from an operations perspective. What is very scary from an operations perspective is when you lose generation and you don't have generation that can quickly come online, like quick start units. And we had 12 days of simultaneous low wind output. That is probably one of the things that is the most scary from an operations perspective, is if you don't have enough reserves that can come on quickly to change and to prepare for a wind drought, in which we see that is very well possible. So you think about our reliability attributes conversation, and I loved the engineers' work earlier on because they get to really do the cool stuff. But on the reliability attributes, we're talking about if your coal fleet is leaving, if we're, some of the policies are pushing out some of the gas units, do we have the right attributes online to take care of this where we don't have wind and it's not during daylight periods? So driving a lot of this, and this, you combine that uncertainty and complexity and you combine it with the load growth that we are now seeing. Typically, we talked about load growth being flat. Load growth is taking off and at unprecedented rates that we haven't seen in the past. And this is why a lot of our CEOs are having a lot of conversations around the country of, let's make sure that we're going into this eyes wide open. 20 years, we're gonna be okay, but that transition is something that we really need to take close eyes at, which is really exciting for the engineers and analysts during this time, is the tools, the modeling, the things that you're doing right now. This is something that you can tell your kids and your grandkids about, that you were a part of, building out the transmission network, forecasting what's coming. And I can't stop saying like how exciting this is in the industry to want to be a part of this. And so I talked a little bit about the past, and now we're moving towards a lot more complexity and uncertainty, and that is fewer controllable resources, less predictability, increased demand. The other things from an operations perspective is that really gets the operators, keeps them up at night or worried is if our load forecast comes in wrong, and making sure that we have enough generation to quickly get online. Well, with wind, you can't always forecast when that's going to occur. And the sun's pretty predictable, but there's a lot of complexities in the operations realm that's really making it important that we connect our planning and operations group so we can handle the complexity of it in real time. So this is MISO's opportunity. It's called the reliability imperative. We're trying to make sure our markets are ready, make sure it has the right attributes. We're incentivizing the generation. We're looking at how we use AI and machine learning in the control room. We use that recently where they take a look and they adjust the reserves based on some potential probable scenarios. And then transmission evolution is where I live, and I'm pretty excited about it. So that is our long-range transmission planning, and what it does is really we try to look at defining forward-looking resource expansion. So we're moving to PLEXOS as our resource expansion tool. We try to identify least regrets transmission build-out, and least regrets at $20 billion is a pretty big deal for our Tranche 2. And then we're really focusing on regional transmission solutions. So we're trying to really build out a transmission superhighway to accommodate the vast change in the resource portfolio. So this is something that my team and I geek out on. One of the teams, they don't press any of the buttons, but my team, very proud of them, they work on our future scenarios. In Future 1, what we really take a look at is our footprint develops in accordance to kind of industry standards with the load. So load growth consistent, it's most conservative. Emissions decline as we're retiring some of our old coal fleet, things like that. And we discount unannounced members' plans by 15%. It's kind of the low book, and it's like, okay, what happens if this doesn't come out as we're all projecting? And then on the other end, Future 3 is probably the most advanced. We are anticipating what we put in our models, a 50% increase in energy by 2042, basically due to electrification. Where we've picked is right in the middle, Future 2 for our Tranche 2, which is ongoing right now. And that is a $17 to $23 billion portfolio that started out with resource expansion. And so in our Future 2, we assume that if you've announced it in an IRP, if it's unlegislated, we'll count it. Everything that they put out there, we're considering those goals. And the other thing we think about, looking at least a 30% increase in energy footprint wide, mostly driven by electrification of the residential sector. So we take all of the inputs. It's a very intensive stakeholder process. Team, when they did the resource expansion, they build it out, but they also then cite it. And so they work pretty closely with what's in our queue and on our membership. And the team wanted to give them a Gatorade afterwards and a towel because they are really working pretty hard. But they took over 300 changes from our membership on to get these futures in a state, because this foundation is what we then put in our reliability and economic models for resources, that we do our power flow and economic benefit analysis and congestion analysis for our portfolio. So this is our maps. Our maps always generate a lot of conversation in our stakeholder community. We have initial maps of like, here's the range of the possible, and then it usually narrows down. So this is Tranche 1 that was approved recently. It's a $10.3 billion portfolio, 18 transmission lines. So this was for our North region. So that was our Tranche, our Midwest region. And that was recently approved. What we're in the heart of right now is our Tranche 2. And so we're looking to hopefully finalize that as we work with our neighboring entities and all of our stakeholders by the end of the year. That is our goal from our executives. I cross our fingers. It's also in our STI payment. So we're going to be very sad if we don't get this across the finish line this year, but we are going to do the right thing. And it takes a lot of stakeholder collaboration. So if you noticed on this map, which we're estimating between 17 and 23 billion, there's a lot of green lines on here. That's our 765 kV. We don't have that in MISO currently. And so it's a huge initiative to build this across a transmission superhighway. Our partners to the east at PJM, they do have a 765. So we have a lot of coordination with our neighbors. The other thing in addition to this map, we've had a lot of coordination. Oh, you see on this JTIQ, that's our Joint Targeted Interconnection Queue. And that was kind of a groundbreaking work we did with SPP to kind of look at what are the, do we need additional transmission along the seams to enable some of the generation? So we're really moving into an industry that we need partnerships. It's just absolutely critical with the diminishing reserves, and we're going to be dependent on each other as utilities and interconnection, and we need to get it right. And so these type of RTO, ISO partnerships and collaboration with our members has just been more and increasingly important to make sure that we handle the transition to the new future correctly. So this is our output from our resource expansion. I want to draw your attention to a couple of things. This resource expansion was used with our old tool Aegeus that uses a load duration curve. This is putting it nicely, but we put belts and suspenders and some duct tape on this tool to do this, and the team worked really hard to make sure that there was no issues with the data and the quality. So we're very excited to transition to resource expansion to PLEXOS. And what we saw here is that the bright yellow, the 29 gigawatts, that's significant. So one of the things with tools that use load duration curve, they don't see certain periods of the day. And so back when we had a peak in the summer, and as long as you could meet the peak in the summer, that'd be great. No big deal. We could handle all other hours. But we're starting to see a separation between what we need for capacity and what we need for energy during all hours. And so what we found is during our resource adequacy session that there was 29 gigawatts of emergency energy that couldn't be covered with the attributes that we had with the renewable fleet. So this 29 gigawatts, and we worked really, really hard on this acronym, but we called them flexible attribute units. And there was, believe it or not, we got a couple executives to weigh in on what this acronym should be before we released it. But what this really is kind of a holding period for 29 gigawatts, a future technology that's not here yet. So had a wonderful conversation with the gentleman about small nuclear reactors. That's something that could be included. Long duration storage, 8 hours. So these things are really important. We aren't seeing the technology with the attributes we need yet. And so that's why the transition period with gas as an insurance product is going to become very, very important as we make sure we keep the lights on. So what we found, and when you are working with engineers and analysts, we usually kind of nerd out a bit, but we call this the twilight zone or the twilight period. And you can see that gray highlight is where we found, especially during hot summer days with low wind and after sunset, we had some trouble. And we were going to need units that have the attributes we need to ramp up quickly, to regulate during this period. And we also saw it, and I struggle with this word. Our engineers really use this word, and I can't say it. It's like diurnal, but it's double peaking. I don't know why I continue to try to attempt to say that, but typically you would see in our system was a summer peaking. Now what we're seeing is that we're going to have a summer peak and a winter peak, and those are also important. And during those times before sunrise and sunset, that we can see these time periods that are more increasingly important, that we need reliability attributes. So we saw that for about 26 to 29 gigawatts as a range. I think it was 13 to 26 days during the year, 3 to 4 hours of the day could be at risk. Without units with this type of capability, I'm sure you all can come up with some better names, maybe something, future technology is SMRs. That's great. Let's plug them in because we're going to need them to manage this transition. So it would be remiss without putting up a good slide about how much we love PLEXOS as we transition there. And so our team is moving towards capacity expansion and using that. So you heard the lovely ladies before talk about how they're already using it for resource adequacy. And in the LOLE work, we are transitioning and to do our futures assessment. And so one of the biggest things that we learned when we were going through the RFP process or request for proposal, it's amazing that people will knock on your doors on want to buy software. They will become your best friends. But we had to look through that logically and say, hey, which tool are we choosing? And it really kind of came down to the support and the ability to provide feedback and partnership into what we need as an RTO. And so as an individual utility, sometimes all tools are great. As an RTO, we worry about computation speed and how long it takes. And we also think about can you process the volume of data that we have. And so the things that we are thinking about moving towards a chronological tool kind of helps see those edge periods where all hours of the day with energy. And so they have a couple settings besides a load duration curve that'll help us tighten up the solution to see those hours more clearly. We were also looking at better features when we were incorporating our policy goals and a little bit more granularity. And so I think overall too, the size, hearing is very encouraging, the partnerships they have with Microsoft and the folks that they're bringing on to help support users like us, because it's really important that we have good technology to model, to forecast, because in MISO's position, we can't afford to get it wrong. And we can't afford necessarily to slow down at the pace of this is coming. So when we're building out transmission at the 20B level, it's really important that we have great models. So I think questions. And if you got really hard ones, was anybody from MISO raise their hand? Because those details, only one taker. Jordan, you should put your hands up. Yeah. Oh, he's ducking. So if you got super detailed questions, this table right here, these two tables in the front, are great engineers and analysts that work on our teams.
Hi, my name is Christina. I'm with Allied Energy. So you mentioned the reliability initiatives that you guys are focusing on to get some of those, try to incentivize that quick start generation. So I'm wondering, what are some of the methods you are considering to implement, those incentivized technologies? How are you incentivizing members in your region to build those?
Yes. We are probably taking a two-point approach. There's a lot of, we are posting this reliability imperative report. I know our CEO, John Baer, is visiting all across the industry and talking to our members about how important it is, what we're about to go through. But we also have to do our part. And so we are very heavily looking at, do we have the right market structure to incentivize the units to bid into our market? And so we envision some changes coming into our market structure to help ensure that we get the attributes that we need from the units to keep it more reliable.
Hi, Josh Farnsworth. I'm from the Hole in the Map comment in Excelerate.
Nice, nice, okay.
Just out of curiosity, your Tranche 2 and the transmission expansion plans, are those mostly using existing rights-of-way, or are those going to be new paths where you would have to go through significant civil planning as well?
Yes, so very good question. It is definitely at a heart of what we're talking about. In Tranche 1, it was mostly existing right-of-way. It was our first way to get $10 billion through the door and have the right cost allocation. And so we wanted that to go as smooth as possible for our regulators. Tranche 2 is a little bit of a different beast. So we're exploring the transmission superhighway. So it may be outside of existing right-of-way and new greenfield. So, but if we can do it on existing right-of-way, sign us up for that because that's easy for the siting process.
Hi, Chen from.
Are you in the back? Oh, okay, now I see you. These lights are really intense. They're not lying about that.
Can you hear me? Yes. Chen from Avangard Renewables. So my question is on your presentation. So in terms of utilizing PLEXOS for the capacity expansion, I assume it's mainly on the future resource build out, and that eventually will put back in a production cost software again for the transmission constraint. Is that also based on PLEXOS, or is that?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's something that we're keeping open, but currently we envision for our next tranche of projects, we're going to do capacity expansion in PLEXOS. But we currently do have ProMod in-house for economics, so that's our adjusted production cost tool that we use.
Thank you. Because I was wondering that just given the complexity of both transmission and resource, that given there's so many resources in MISO and along with other new technology like energy storage, it might be very difficult to have both the transmission and resource in a nodal perspective in the same fashion. Otherwise, it might increase the runtime and also the convergence. So thank you.
Yeah, spot on. You could probably be best friends with a lot of folks on my team. Run times and solves are something that we are very sensitive to because we churn out a lot of models. Our stakeholders review them, and they like turnaround real quickly. And so stakeholders usually come to me when I want to escalate things on when can we get our updated models. And then I go back to my team and I was like, let's get this posted as soon as we can. It was like, that's great, Christina. 3 days later, when it's done running, we'll be able to provide them a model. So that's something that we really would like to partner with Energy Exemplar and our vendors, is that run times we can no longer wait a week or two for a simulation to run. Honestly, it breaks my heart when I have my engineers tell me like, I came in during the weekend, I kicked this off so we could have it by Monday, because it takes that long to run. So I really would love to see a tool that can process the amount of data that we have in a day. That would be Christina's wish list for the future.
Wayne Schaefer with Excelon. What factors do you think make it possible to successfully make such large proactive transmission investments across your whole footprint?
Partnerships and our stakeholders. I can't say enough about our stakeholder community and the input that they give us. They keep us on our toes. We have our independent market monitor that leans in, that keeps us honest. We have our regulators, our organization of MISO states that lean in. Folks are very intrigued by what we're doing, and we want to make sure that we get it right. And as we go into more interregional planning, our coordination with other ISOs and RTOs is paramount. So as you are commenting at Exelon, you're probably aware, there are some potential interconnections with Tranche 2. So it's incredibly important that we have great partnership with PJM. We talk with some of the folks, Emanuele, see his face on a weekly basis sometimes. And so partnerships across the RTOs is really important, and we're really excited about our great partnership with PJM.
Any more questions? Christina, what's some tough ones?
Yeah. Okay. Thank you all.